Today we're going to go over the initial adjustments. Say you were working on a slide box. For whatever reason, you had to disconnect everything, start from scratch. This video here is going to give you guys a general idea on how to adjust an Accu-Slide system. This one, in this mock-up version, is our Accu-Slide above floor on rollers. Your flush floors and the ABS version and all that stuff, they're going to be adjusted in the same manner. You just may have to add a little extra tension to the bottom, especially on like your flush floors or a larger box, to help get those bottoms to pull tight and seal up against the extrusion. So with that, we'll get started. Right now, this room is at the halfway position. This will be a situation where you got to start your adjustments all over again. You're starting at that halfway position. Your outside cables are hooked up to the box and your rubber grommets are in place. You've attached your inside standoff brackets. Your placement of those brackets are all properly spaced as far as up and down, and the brackets are properly spaced from the backside of your LVL board or your fascia board, which should be an 1/8 inch up to 1/4 of an inch, but they should all be the same spacing away from that board that's going to go over top of this tube. On the outside, your spacing, if you have the embossed standoff brackets, if you have the embossed top and bottom of the bracket, that is your spacing. These points should be touching the backside of your T-molding. If they're not and they're crept back away, that's going to give slack back to the system that you're going to have to take up in cable adjustment. And it could cause that particular bracket to touch and seal before the other three. And that would be an issue. The motor's going to amp out and you're going to have a hard time pulling those other three corners in. So that could cause a bad seal on the outside. And the outside especially is definitely not where we want a bad seal. With this being traveled down the highway, pulled across the country, in the middle of a rainstorm, you're going to end up getting water issues. So your first steps are going to be check your brackets, ensure everything is mounted correctly. Non-self-tapping screws on the interior standoffs, unless it's steel construction. There should be wood backer tube from the OEM, as well as your outside tubes. You can use self-tappers. Number 10s are larger out there. Corner pulleys, motor, all that should be number 10 non-self-tapping screw or larger. To get started with your adjustment process, you got everything hooked up, all 4 cables on the exterior, all 4 cables on the interior. All your rubber grommets are in place to where the cable can't bounce back out. If you're working on a deeper box, you may end up having to get on a ladder for this. Gain access above the room. At this point, your chain connectors, and that is the point where your adjustment nut meets this little U-shaped bracket. This is your chain connector. You'll have a chain connector on both sides connecting to the in and outs. And then again, over here on the right-hand side of the motor, you'll have 2 chain connectors as well. The screw heads on those should be facing in towards each other. And they should be aligned with one another at this halfway position. You'll notice I'm off about a 1/2 link. That's just where the length of this chain was cut. So it's not a big deal, but you want to get this as close as possible to being centered. That's going to keep your timing on the right and left side of the room. If for some reason I started out with this crept up like this, chances are I'm going to run my chain connector into my sprocket. The room's not going to seal in the out position, and I'm going to end up burying all my in adjustment. So we want to make sure that we start out with these at that halfway position, and that those chain connectors are aligned with one another as close as possible. That side's good. This side's off a little bit. Go ahead and jump this around. Now those are in alignment. First thing you're going to do is grab a hold, start on either one side or the other. Going to grab a hold of the in and out cable adjustment brackets together and pull out towards you. That's going to kind of evenly distribute all that slack in the system. From here, we're going to go ahead and take our 7/16 and we're going to start with the chains. And we're going to try to mirror this bracket with this bracket. If I have a 1/2 inch showing a chain adjustment left here, I want a 1/2 inch showing back here. I'm going to put a 7/16 on the back side. I'm going to tighten up some of this to draw up some of this slack. You can use a gear wrench or you can use a socket and a ratchet. You can also use a drill, not an impact, with a socket attachment on it, with like a 3/8 drive adapter. Just be cautious when you're using a battery operated tool such as a drill. You don't want to twist things up or over torque anything. Now that I've removed about the same amount of chain from both sides, now I can start mirroring up the cables. I'm going to start with my in, take it up till I feel a little bit of tension on it. And this all can be done by hand. You don't have to use a bunch of tools to do this. We're just finger snugging everything tight. It is important to keep in mind, just like Mark Howie's told us in previous videos, it takes more pressure to seal the bottoms than the tops. So when you're drawing your slack up, be mindful of that. And let's not go crazy on those top outs or top ends on each side. Just put a little bit on them. The reason for that is if you put too much on it, try to take all the slack out. As soon as we cycle this room out, it's going to want to bend these studs, and we don't want to do that. Now that these are mirrored, I'm going to go to the other side, do the exact same thing I did on the left side of the motor. Grab a hold of the in and out brackets together, pull. Start with my chain adjustment first. I'm trying to leave myself as much stud adjustment as possible to finish up the adjustments, make my final adjustments on the cables themselves. If you're using a speed wrench and it's not turning on you, sometimes you need to pull away from the nut that you're working on to get some pressure on there so that speed wrench turns. Pull some of that slack back to me on my in. All I'm doing is mirroring the in and the out. Now that the majority of the slack is out, now I can go ahead and on this side, I've pretty much got most of my tension on my bottom cables fairly snug. Now it's just mirroring up my top in and out with one another. So making sure that I'm not going too crazy with that. I don't want to bend any of those studs. Now that you got the majority of the slack removed from the system, now you can go ahead and operate the slide from the switch in the extend position and run it all the way out. From this point, we're going to still stay with our outs. You always do your out adjustments, and the room on the Accu-Slide is always adjusted from the out or extended position. First thing we're going to do is we're going to inspect our standoff brackets and ensure that they are hitting and touching the aluminum extrusion or plastic if it was the G4. We are making contact at the tops on both sides. Inspect your bottoms. Make sure that those are touching as well. You will end up seeing a gap on the bottom on much larger rooms or flush floors. Just weight and gravity alone, they're naturally going to want to kick back in on you. And you can make a fine tweak adjustment from there. If this bracket was not touching, I would come up to my bottom out cable. I would pull on it until and see if I was able to get this bracket to smack up against and touch that extrusion. If I couldn't, I would, just like in one of our previous videos, I would go to the opposing cable, loosen it up, which would be my bottom end. Now try to pull again, and that should allow that bracket to start touching the mech as you're pulling on it. And from that point, you can go ahead and take your clamping, even those vice grips, clamp on to the stud. In this case, this is a mock-up. This has had some repairs done to it, so we have an eye bolt in place of the stud. Clamp onto it, grab your 3/8 and start tightening up on that cable, periodically grabbing that cable, pulling on it, and ensuring that I'm still making contact down at the bottom on that bracket with the extrusion. Eventually, I'll be able to tighten this up to a point where it's holding the bracket up against the extrusion. With this particular setup on this mock-up, we didn't have that issue. All 4 brackets are touching. Once you have all 4 interior standoff brackets touching, your outs got a fine tweak to them, but they're not quite complete. What I'm looking for is the bracket to be straight up and down, not kicked one way or the other, and about 6-8 inches back. You can almost pinch these cables together, not quite, and the brackets are still touching. Once we've done that, that side and on the out bracket is complete. We have a jam nut on the chain. It should be locked down to the cable adjustment bracket at all times. That's going to stop this bracket from turning and colliding with the end while it's in operation. You can get on the front side of the nut and lock it down. The problem with doing that is sometimes you get your wrench stuck in there. I like to spin that down to the bracket, grab my 7/16, go on the back side, hold on to my cables in my bracket, and lock it down, pinching all 3, this adjustment nut, the bracket, and the jam nut all together and locking it in place. When we get to the ends, you'll notice the chain turned a little bit. You can go ahead and grab your wrench or your pliers, and you can tighten that up and turn it to it, and just make sure everything's nice and uniform, nice and straight here. Your bracket is in alignment with your chain. It's not tilted back or forward to where these in and outs can pass one another. So this out side, the left side of the motor, that out is complete. Now we go to our right side, go to our out bracket. We've inspected. The brackets are touching at the bottom. Brackets are touching at the top. Now we're going to go to our out cables themselves. And I said about 6-8 inches or so from the back of the studs there. And this one is super tight. I can loosen up on that a little bit. And I don't have much in my cables on this side to do that. So I'm going to loosen up on the chain itself. 7/16 on the chain nut. Loosen that up until I've got that tension that I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for right there. Now I can run this jam nut down to the out bracket and tighten it up against it and pinch everything. And then this out is complete on this right side. Sometimes you may have to use your wrench and run this jam nut down to the bracket, especially if this is a system that's been messed with a couple of times and adjustments have been made to it, either by a dealer, service center, or yourself if you work on your own product. Work it down with your wrench, nice and tight against it. Once again, on the back side, pinch everything together, holding my bracket straight. Nice and uniform with your chain. Now your outs are complete. Everything's sealing and touching in the extended position. Our outs are locked down. They're complete. Nothing else to do to those. Now we need to go to our ends, and we're just going to take up this extra slack that we got on here. No need for tools here at this point. We're just finger snug everything just like that, just taking the slack out. Do the same on the left-hand side. Once you have that slack taken up on your ends on the left and right-hand side of the motor, now we can go ahead and cycle the room just to make sure that we're seeding all the cables onto the pulleys, stretching the chain out, getting any and all slack out of the system. How we can do that with the stretching process for any of the Accu-Slides, instead of a 3 full cycle like on our exact slide, in this out position, we're going to bump the room in a little bit, a couple inches, back out, and we're going to repeat that 2 or 3 cycles. Now we're going to make 1 full stroke all the way in, or cycle in. Once we're in that in position, we're going to bump it in and out just a couple of inches. Repeat that a couple of times. Run it all the way out. Once we ran that all the way out, ensure your inside standout brackets are still touching at all 4 corners. Go to your in bracket, and any excess slack in the system is now going to be on these ends on the left and right-hand side of the motor. No need to mess with your outs. Again, we completed that process already. Now, if you're running close to maxing out on any of your cables, you can take this chain adjustment and start tightening it up, and that's going to evenly start drawing up your tension on your cables as well. Or you can do individual cables if you have the room for it. Here I have room on both cables. I want to use my vice grips, smooth portion of that stud, clamp onto it, and I'm going to tighten this cable up. And what I'm looking for on the tension, we go off the outside cables on these ends. So on the bottom end, I should be able to go to the outside, pick up and push down on that cable a half inch down, half inch up, 1 inch overall. You can set these to that point and then go out and double check, and you can come back in and make a fine tweak from there if you need to. But this is gonna, just a little bit of play left in the system, not a lot. That little extra play is gonna give to the outs when I run the room in and allow the ends to pull nice and tight and get a nice seal on the outside of the coach. Once I have my adjustments where I want them on my ends, I'm gonna make sure that jam nut is locked down tight to the end bracket. And once again, we're going to go ahead and go on the back side with the 7/16, hang on to our bracket, tighten it up, and pinch everything together. Notice my chain is not in uniform with my cable adjustment bracket now. You can take a wrench, a small headed screwdriver. I like to take my vice grips, just grab onto the chain connector, pull down, pull up. So I'm still tightening as I'm straightening this out. And now everything's in nice and uniform in relationship with the chain connector and your in adjustment bracket. We'll go to the other side. We're going to do the exact same thing we did on the right side, except for I don't have any chain adjustment here. So I'm going to take this up out of the studs on this left-hand side. Keep in mind, this is a mock-up. Ideally, everything should match up on the left and right hand side for the most part. With this being a mock-up, we've worked on this thing a few times. So cables may be a little bit longer or shorter than what they're supposed to be. A little bit on my bottom end. Put a little tension on my bottom, my top end. My bracket's kicked a little bit at the bottom. On the top of that bracket, it's kicked in a little bit. I can add a little extra tension there to straighten that out. And now I have what I'm looking for, 1/2 inch up, 1/2 inch down on my bottom and my top end cable. Now I can run that jam nut down to the end adjustment bracket, lock it in place. Make sure you straighten your chain out again. Once you've done that, the last thing to do, the last step, is to grab your anti-vibration foam blocks. That should be these here. They look kind of like a little, like white marshmallow. They have a punch out in the center that takes the shape or form of the adjustment coupler nut, the 3/8. They're designed to go over the stud and get wedged all the way into the back side of the bracket as far as it can go. If it's not done in this manner and it's sticking out on the end here, it's not doing you a bit of good. The intent is with this in place, the adjustment nut cannot either tighten up or back off of the adjustment stud. If you don't have any foam blocks, you can instead use in place of the foam block a 1/4-20 free running jam nut. You can run that nut onto the stud up against the coupler nut, the 3/8 coupler nut, and jam it tight up against it. You won't be able to move it off with your fingers. That's tight enough. That's going to stop those cable nuts from backing off themselves. So do this to all 4 cables on each side of the motor, 8 overall. There's my outs. Put these on my ends. Do the same to the right side of the motor on all those 4 cable studs, wedging them all the way back to the cable adjustment bracket. And from this point, your adjustments are complete on the Accu-Slide.